our 97.3 ESPN Phillies Insider Frank Klose, kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on this Tuesday. How you been, Frank?
I'm doing well. How are you, Rich?
I'm doing well. Good to talk to you, and we look forward to speaking with you throughout the season. Let's get into it now. So I guess the latest is there are conversations going on right now between the Phils and Arrieta. Any new light you can shed on this?
No, I think it's kind of what it was before. The Phillies have money. Other teams don't necessarily have money. The market is what it is, and players like Arrieta are still out there unsigned. And I think the Phillies are in a tremendous position where if a price comes down, if the number of years comes down, they could be the last one standing there with money in their pocket, and they could take advantage of such an opportunity. That doesn't necessarily mean the Phillies are going to make a move such as Arrieta, but the fact that the Phillies and Arrieta's camp are talking now might be an indication that he doesn't have a whole lot of suitors.
I agree 100%. If you go back to December when they met with Boris, who's Arrieta's agent, in the winter meetings, they had no interest in that long-term deal. Now, you mentioned now because all of a sudden he doesn't have a bunch of suitors out there. Forget about the Darvish deal because he wasn't going to command those type of dollars. Now, I don't have a problem with a 2 or 3 year deal. And you mentioned the Phillies have money. I believe they still needed to go out and get another frontline starter. And as you alluded to, there's going to be 10 or other teams that we can speak of that are going to have interest in Arrieta. But the fact that they showed a little patience and now they're kind of waiting it out, and you've got that familiarity with some of the with some of the current brass that was over in Baltimore with Arrieta. So you're right. I mean, it could be a fit where, look, we'll lock in for 2 or 3 years, but under no circumstances would I would not go for a 5 or 6 year deal. I mean, I don't even like the fact that Darvish's deal, when you're talking about the money he's going to make in year number 4 or 5 and the age is going to be. But for Arrieta, a short-term deal might be the answer here, and really the only answer, Frank.
Right, and I think the way that Scott Boras has been structuring his deals lately, there are opt-outs, there are incentive clauses, there are options that vest automatically. So if you're thinking of somebody like Arrieta, you think back to kind of the age that Cliff Lee and Roy Halladay their careers kind of went, kind of ended. It was right around age 34-ish, and if you're talking about signing a 31-year-old to a 5-6 year deal like the Cubs did with Yu Darvish, I don't think that's a good idea. But if you're the Cubs, you can afford to do that because if you're the Cubs, you had core, and you know that you might only have 3 more years of really good shots of winning the World Series, so you might as well just eat the money down the line so that you could do that. And in a certain respect, the Phillies did that when they signed Cliff Lee back then in 2011. They were hoping to get the last little bit out of that run. And they ate the money at the end. The Phillies aren't in a position where they want to eat the money at the end. But if Arrieta comes down to 3 years and they can pay him more than another team might on an annual basis, Darvish got $21 million. If it comes down to it that 25 times 3 is enough to get Arrieta, then they might be in business. But if they don't, I don't see them going and signing Arrieta to be a Philly when he's 36 years old.
No, I agree. And a couple minor moves with Hutchinson and Abad. And I like the move for Hutchinson because maybe they're thinking, okay, you can push now or compete for a rotation spot. But again, he was a guy that at the time, I know he's 26, 27 right now, he was looked at a potential long-term rotation piece for Toronto. So these are minor moves that shouldn't really go unnoticed. Now, as far as the starting rotation, give me, what do you envision the starting rotation to consist of? How do you foresee it?
Well, I think we'll all agree Aaron Nola is clearly going to be there. But beyond that, you have Vince Velasquez and Jared Eichhoff, who last year did not perform to their abilities and they struggled with injuries. I think they're good bets, though, to be in the starting rotation. And beyond that, you have 6 names competing for 2 spots right now, which could become 1 spot if the Phillies do get their veteran starter, whether it be an Arrieta type or if they perhaps go back to somebody like Jeremy Hellickson. But you've got, if you just go through the long list of names, I always have to stop and think because there's so many young pitchers that have some talent that haven't really proven anything yet in the major leagues and grabbed the spot. So you're talking Zach Eflin, you're talking Mark Leiter, you're talking Jake Thompson, you're talking Nick Pivetta, you're talking I'm always going to forget
Ben Lively
of the list because it's so long. Ben Lively, right? So they have all these names, and I think Tom Eshelman has a shot down the line that one of them or two of them could step up and show that they mean business, and if they don't, then the Phillies have to make some decisions going forward. And I think in some respects, if they don't end up having somebody like Arrieta fall into their lap, I almost rather see those guys just kind of fight for a spot and show that they deserve this spot. Because wouldn't it be a shame if you sign a Jeremy Hellickson, for example, and somehow maybe Ben Lee gets falls under the radar and finds success somewhere else?
Right.
You would hate to see that happen.
How about the pen? I mean, we saw what they went through early on last year, where it just seems there was no rhyme or reason. And again, the move for Nishak, reliever, he returns, which again I think is a smart move, especially money-wise. He could have went somewhere else, but how do you envision the bullpen as well? And really, I mean, do we have a set closer?
Right. The closer position is one thing that I'm still kind of unsettled about if I'm evaluating the bullpen as a whole. We saw last year that yes, she got some effective innings out of Pat Nishak. I think Tommy Hunter is going to give them some good innings as well. And you've got a lot like the starters. You've got some talented arms that haven't really stepped up totally yet. Now, if I look at Hector Neris and I go through his pitching splits, when you take a look at his ninth inning, that there's something isn't right there. Now, who knows if he was not comfortable as a closer just yet, or if he really does have a chance to be a closer. Now, his ERA, last year, his ERA was 3.15 in the ninth inning, which isn't terrible, but it seems like the later in the game, the harder he struggled. So, I think that number did come down as the year went on. So that's a good thing. So I think that right now they're going to give him the first shot to basically step up and show that he's the closer of the future. And then if he's not the closer of the future, well, then the Phillies could dabble in free agency next year. There's one thing that I think that they might want to consider as well. You have the same look as the Arrieta situation, right? You have Greg Holland still sitting out there as a free agent right now. If you can throw him a whole lot of money for 1 year, let him come into the Phillies camp, be the closer. If he's doing really, really well, he's somebody you could flip for later. Or if you're really satisfied that he's fully healthy, then he's somebody you could sign long term if you want. So I think as a team with money, I would not close off that possibility.
Hey, he was an all-star last year. I mean, he had a great year.
And Greg Holland, I think he's a Scott Boras client too. So who knows? Maybe in the middle of the Arrieta discussions, they can talk about him too. But you might have a scenario there where someone like Holland could be a sort of a wild card that you sign just because, again, you have the money.
Yeah, I think right now, though, Neris to me seems to be the most likely, most logical reliever with the season right upon us. People, tweet at me and even call up and mention Nishak. It's not happening. I mean, first of all, he wasn't used as a closer last year. He's never been in his career. The one thing that stands out, though, and they know, you lock him behind closed doors. One of their bugaboos last year is they couldn't close games. I mean, so it's something that not only do they need to address early on, but they've got to be consistent. Whoever it is, you've got to get some consistency because that was one of the bugaboos last year. Their bullpen struggled.
And I would keep an eye out for Luis Garcia. I don't think the story's done on him yet. It's really funny that at Gabe Kapler's opening press conference, of all the names he mentions first, it's Luis Garcia. So I think that Garcia, he does definitely have a lively arm. He seemed to start to build his craft as time went on last season, and he's somebody who could really turn out to be something. And I'm guilty of thinking that last year was his make or break, and I wouldn't have actually kept him at the beginning of last year, being that he didn't make the club. But they stuck with him in the organization. He really seemed to figure some things out, and I would also want to throw out there, speaking of Gabe Kapler, that you might not see the traditional bullpen use here where you have a set closer. I think you're more likely to see a Terry Francona bullpen in Cleveland, where you throw your best relievers at the best hitters and whatever they happen to come into a game. And we saw the last couple of playoff years that Kenley Jansen, I think, came into a fourth inning game last year in the NLCS. So managers aren't afraid to use a guy when they think they need him most. And I think that that's something that Gabe Kapler, probably knowing Gabe Kapler as the one that likes to be bold, which is his motto this spring, he might give that a shot. So if he thinks he can get the biggest lineup threat out in the 7th inning, you might see Neris there, and maybe it just so happens that Neshek pitches the last inning, but it's not because he's the closer.
What's your expectations for Santana this year? I mean, here's a guy that adds to that lineup. The couple things that stood out, and again, I don't have an issue with the money, even at his age, because first of all, if you look over the last several years, his strikeouts have went down, his average has gone up, and he's going to hit you 25, 30 home runs. A couple years ago, 34. So in that sandbox, you got to figure, I mean, if you get 30, 35, even 28 to 33 out of him this year, again, you're adding another bat to that offense.
Yeah, I think he changes the complexion of this Phillies lineup incredibly because, if you look at all the guys they have, all the young talent, they didn't have that one veteran bat that's super reliable. And, the young guys are going to have their moments where they struggle, I'm sure. But having a force like him, and if you take Santana out of this lineup, someone asked me a question for the Phillies mailbag I'm going to talk about with Mike Gill at 3:30. But one of the questions was the relationship between Santana and Hoskins and how they would help each other in the lineup. And I think it's huge. If you have a Phillies lineup where you have Rhys Hoskins as your, I guess, only power offensive force, and he's got guys around him which might be very nice players like Aaron Altair or Nick Williams. Mm-hmm. Instead, that's quite the drop off from the veteran Carlos Santana. And, for me as a general baseball fan, Santana has always been one of my favorite players. And every year playing fantasy baseball, I always tried to grab Carlos Santana, not just because of the numbers, but because of the level of consistency.
Right.
Because, he was always a predictable, steady offensive output. And I just think he does wonders for this lineup. And, it's nice that the Phillies looked outside the box and really took time to consider just how well Rhys Hoskins might do in left field to see if it was worth taking a step, and they went and did it.
Who's under more pressure this year? Is it Odubel Herrera or Miguel Franco?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be Franco's time to really show that he belongs, and the Phillies put Franco's locker next to Santana's this year in spring training, and it was not by coincidence. They're both from the Dominican mm-hmm. Republic. Certainly, Santana is somebody revered among people in the Dominican Republic for all he's done for baseball, and I think they're really hoping that they can really get all the talent out of Franco this year that they haven't seemed to get so far. Because I do believe he is a talented player, but as we've seen there are plenty of talented players in Major League Baseball that never really get it together. So this will be his chance to really get it together. And the Phillies have options. Scott Kingery will be up at some point, and he's taking a lot of ground balls at third base so far this year. But but Franco's going to get the first opportunity to really show that he belongs. And if he doesn't belong, then the Phillies will try to make a long-term decision regarding third base later. And I know they love to throw out the Machado name, but many teams going after maybe Machado in a year. And if Franco works out and you can sign Machado too, you never know how else the infield could line up, or which infielder could play the outfield if you want. So there's a lot of time for that to work itself in. But I think for now, they're going to see if they get him pair him with this great mentor that's Carlos Santana, see if they can really take the talent, which I think a lot of people really believe is there, and can put it into practice.
We'll talk a little more about the projected lineups in another week or so. Lastly, before I let you get out of here, what were your first impressions on Kapler?
Well, he's definitely interesting. It's funny because I kind of don't know what to expect with Kapler, and my initial reaction is that I'm going to see a lot of unexpected things throughout the course of the year. So, in fact, in a week from now, after we see the Phillies play a little bit, maybe we'll have a sense of where he's going with this lineup. But I would not be shocked if it's much different than any lineup we've ever seen thus far. So,
right.
So I think I agree. I know Jim Bowden of The Athletic worded it that Kapler is either going to be a huge success or a big disaster, nothing in between. My arrow is going towards the success side of that at this moment. At least that's what my gut is telling me. But you don't know just yet. And I look forward to actually getting to see just kind of what he becomes and what he does.
Hey, listen, if all else fails, he'll just take his shirt off when they have their home opener, right? Because guess what? None of the women are going to complain. If anything, they're going to be the rippest, most conditioned team probably in baseball, if that counts for anything.
Yeah, and their diet will be one unlike any other.
That's right, exactly. It's always like the Brady diet. All right, pal. Always appreciate it. Good stuff. Look forward to talking throughout the season. And, of course, keep up the good work. Always appreciate a couple moments.
Thanks, Rich.
All right, you got it, Frank. Be well. Frank Klose joining us on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline.